Avoidants are creatures of habit. Just like a bear is very active in the summer and goes inside his cave in the winter, avoidants, despite all their chaos, are very predictable. Emotionally intelligent and detached people can read the avoidant like an open book. They know exactly which buttons to press and how to engage with the avoidant. This is why some people have very successful long-term relationships with avoidants without a lot of hurt and pain that usually follows in a typical avoidant relationship. One of the most important aspects of this is mastering the art of timing. When someone masters the art of timing with an avoidant, the entire relationship dynamic transforms from a constant struggle of push and pull into a surprisingly smooth and satisfying connection. The relationship begins to feel easy, natural, and flowing rather than forced, anxious, and exhausting. Conversations happen effortlessly. Intimacy develops organically and conflicts resolve without the usual defensive withdrawal that characterizes poorly timed interactions. The avoidant becomes more emotionally available, more willing to engage in relationship discussions, and more responsive to their partner's needs simply because these interactions are happening at moments when they're psychologically prepared to receive them. The benefits of proper timing extend far beyond avoiding conflict and withdrawal. When timing is aligned with the avoidant's natural rhythms, they begin to associate the relationship with ease and comfort rather than pressure and overwhelm. They start to look forward to intimate conversations instead of dreading them, welcome emotional connection instead of avoiding it, and contribute actively to relationship maintenance instead of passively resisting it. The relationship becomes a source of joy and fulfillment for both people, rather than a constant negotiation between competing needs and defensive strategies. Most importantly, good timing allows the avoidant's authentic self to emerge more frequently and consistently. When they're not defending against poorly timed emotional demands or relationship pressures, their natural capacity for love, care, and connection can surface. They become more generous with affection, more willing to be vulnerable, and more invested in the relationship's success. The person who learns to time their interactions well discovers that avoidants can be deeply loving and committed partners when their psychological safety is respected and their emotional rhythms are honored. The ease that comes with good timing. When timing is mastered, the relationship develops a natural flow that feels effortless for both partners. The avoidant no longer feels constantly pressured or pursued, while their partner no longer feels constantly rejected or dismissed. Interactions happen when both people are emotionally available and receptive, creating positive experiences that build on each other rather than defensive cycles that create increasing distance and frustration. The ease manifests in how conversations unfold naturally without force or manipulation. When someone approaches the avoidant during their receptive phases, discussions about feelings, future plans, or relationship dynamics feel organic rather than awkward or threatening. The avoidant participates willingly rather than defensively, offering their own thoughts and feelings rather than simply responding to pressure or demands from their partner. Physical intimacy also becomes more natural and satisfying when timing is respected. Instead of feeling like one person is always initiating while the other is reluctantly participating, physical connection happens when both people are naturally drawn to it. The avoidant begins to initiate affection and intimacy themselves, rather than always being in the position of responding to or rejecting their partner's advances. The relationship develops positive momentum when timing is good because each successful interaction builds the avoidant's confidence that intimacy can feel safe and enjoyable. They begin to trust that their partner understands their needs and respects their boundaries, which paradoxically makes them more willing to lower those boundaries and allow deeper connection. This creates an upward spiral of increasing intimacy and trust rather than the downward spiral of pressure and withdrawal that characterizes poorly timed relationships. Why most people get timing wrong. The majority of people in relationships with avoidants make crucial timing mistakes because they operate from their own emotional needs and attachment styles rather than understanding the avoidant's psychological rhythms. They attempt to force connection when they need it, rather than waiting for moments when the avoidant is naturally available for it. This creates a dynamic where the avoidant feels constantly pursued and pressured, while their partner feels constantly rejected and frustrated. Many people misinterpret the avoidant's need for emotional space as rejection or disinterest, leading them to pursue harder precisely when the avoidant most needs distance. They take the withdrawal personally and respond with increased efforts to reconnect, inadvertently triggering more defensive withdrawal. This misunderstanding of the avoidant's emotional cycles creates escalating patterns of pursuit and distance that make the relationship feel impossible for both people. Another common mistake involves attempting important conversations during the avoidance withdrawal phases. Partners often choose moments when they're feeling disconnected or uncertain to discuss relationship issues, which typically coincides with the avoidance need for space and emotional regulation. These poorly timed conversations trigger defensive responses and create negative associations with relationship discussions, making future conversations even more difficult. People also frequently miss the avoidant subtle signals of emotional availability because they're focused on their own unmet needs rather than paying attention to their partner's natural rhythms. They might be busy or distracted during the avoidant's rare moments of openness, or they might respond with too much intensity when the avoidant offers small gestures of connection, inadvertently overwhelming them and causing retreat. The cultural emphasis on constant communication and emotional availability in relationships works against successful timing with avoidance. Many people believe that healthy relationships require daily emotional check-ins, frequent expressions of love, and immediate resolution of any relationship concerns. This approach feels suffocating to avoidants and prevents the natural ebb and flow that allows their emotional availability to emerge organically. Understanding avoidant emotional rhythms. Successfully timing interactions with avoidants begins with understanding their natural emotional cycles and rhythms, rather than trying to impose external timing based on relationship advice or personal needs. Avoidants move through predictable phases of emotional availability that follow patterns of connection, overwhelm, withdrawal, and reapproach. These cycles exist regardless of their partner's behavior and must be respected rather than fought against. The connection phase occurs when the avoidant feels emotionally safe and their defenses are naturally lowered. During this phase, they may be more talkative, physically affectionate, and willing to make plans or discuss feelings. This phase often follows periods where they've had adequate alone time to recharge and feel secure in their independence. Recognizing these natural openings allows for meaningful connection without pressure or force. The overwhelm phase begins when the avoidant becomes uncomfortable with the level of intimacy or vulnerability they've allowed. This isn't necessarily triggered by their partner's behavior, but by their own internal anxiety about losing independence or becoming too emotionally dependent. They may become irritable, critical, or emotionally distant as they begin to feel the need for more space and autonomy. The withdrawal phase involves the avoidant creating physical or emotional distance to regulate their anxiety and restore their sense of self. This might involve becoming busier with individual pursuits, spending less time communicating, or simply becoming less emotionally available. Understanding this as a normal part of their emotional regulation prevents panic and allows the cycle to complete naturally. The reapproach phase occurs once the avoidant has successfully regulated their emotions and restored their sense of independence. They begin to miss the connection and gradually become more available and engaging again. This phase often provides excellent opportunities for deeper intimacy and important conversations because they're naturally motivated to reconnect. Timing emotional conversations. The timing of discussions about feelings, relationship concerns, or future plans can determine whether these conversations lead to breakthrough intimacy or defensive shutdown. Approaching these topics during the avoidance withdrawal phase almost guarantees resistance and further distance, while choosing moments during their natural availability can lead to surprisingly open and productive discussions. The optimal timing for emotional conversations is during the late connection phase or early reapproach phase, when the avoidant feels emotionally safe but not yet overwhelmed by intimacy. During these windows, they're most likely to be receptive to sharing their own feelings and hearing about their partner's emotional experience. The key is recognizing when they seem relaxed, present, and naturally inclined toward connection. The setting and approach also matter significantly for timing success. Choosing relaxed private moments rather than stressful or public situations allows the avoidant to feel safe being vulnerable. Starting conversations with appreciation and connection before moving to areas of concern maintains their receptiveness throughout the discussion. Allowing natural pauses for them to process and respond prevents them from feeling rushed or pressured. Recognizing when to pause or postpone conversations that aren't going well demonstrates respect for their emotional limits and builds trust for future discussions. If the avoidant begins showing signs of overwhelm or defensiveness, acknowledging their need for processing time and scheduling a follow-up conversation often leads to better outcomes than pushing for immediate resolution. Strategic response timing. How quickly and intensely someone responds to an avoidant's communication and emotional bids significantly impacts the relationship dynamic. Immediate, intense responses can feel overwhelming and create pressure, while responses that match their natural communication rhythm feel comfortable and sustainable. Understanding their patterns helps calibrate appropriate response timing. When avoidants share something personal or vulnerable, the immediate response can determine whether they feel safe to continue sharing or regret the disclosure and withdraw. Responses that are too enthusiastic, too immediate, or too emotionally demanding can trigger their defensive systems. Measured, appreciative responses that acknowledge their sharing without requiring immediate reciprocation feel safer and encourage continued emotional availability. The timing of physical affection requires particular sensitivity to their emotional state and energy levels. Attempting physical connection during withdrawal phases often feels invasive and triggers further distance. However, offering appropriate physical affection during receptive phases can deepen connection and provide positive reinforcement for their emotional availability. Communication timing also involves matching their natural patterns rather than imposing external expectations. If they typically respond to messages after several hours, matching this rhythm prevents them from feeling pursued or pressured. If they tend to be more communicative during certain times of day or week, being available during these natural windows maximizes positive interaction opportunities. Recognizing windows of opportunity. Avoidance provides subtle signals when they're emotionally available and receptive to deeper connection, but these windows are often brief and require quick recognition and appropriate response. These opportunities might include moments when they volunteer personal information, ask questions about their partner's inner world, suggest shared activities, or simply seem more present and engaged than usual. Post-conflict windows represent particularly important opportunities that are often missed. After arguments or difficult conversations, avoidants typically need processing time, but they often return with greater emotional availability and willingness to repair connection. This reapproach phase can be optimal for healing conversations, expressions of appreciation, or gentle discussions about preventing future conflicts. Achievement windows occur when avoidants accomplish something important professionally or personally. These moments often coincide with increased emotional availability and willingness to share positive experiences with their partner. Recognizing and appropriately celebrating these achievements can strengthen emotional bonds and create positive shared experiences. Stress-related windows happen when avoidants are dealing with external pressures from work, family, or other circumstances. While it might seem counterintuitive, These periods can create opportunities for deeper connection if approached correctly. Offering support without expectation of reciprocation can access their more vulnerable, grateful side and create positive associations with emotional support. Timing requests and boundaries. Making requests of avoidance requires strategic timing that maximizes the likelihood of positive reception while minimizing defensive responses. Requests made during withdrawal phases often feel like additional pressure and trigger resistance. However, requests made during receptive phases can be received as opportunities for connection and contribution to the relationship. The timing within conversations also matters when making requests. Leading with appreciation and connection before expressing needs helps maintain their receptiveness. Framing requests in terms of what would enhance the relationship rather than what's missing prevents defensive responses. Allowing processing time for their response rather than demanding immediate agreement respects their need to consider choices rather than react under pressure. Boundary setting timing impacts how these boundaries are received and respected. Setting boundaries during conflict often feels punitive and triggers defensiveness. Setting boundaries during calm, connected moments allows them to be received as necessary relationship maintenance rather than punishment or control attempts. The timing of consequences for boundary violations requires sensitivity to avoid escalating conflict. Immediate consequences during emotional conversations can trigger withdrawal, while delayed consequences applied during calmer moments can be more effectively communicated and understood as natural results of choices rather than retaliation. Reading avoidant availability cues. Successfully timing interactions requires developing sensitivity to subtle cues that indicate the avoidant's emotional availability and capacity for connection. These cues often appear in their body language, communication patterns, and general energy levels rather than direct verbal communication about their emotional state. Physical cues include body language, eye contact, and general demeanor that indicate openness to interaction. Available avoidants tend to be more physically relaxed, make more eye contact, and seem more present in conversations. Withdrawn avoidants may appear tense, distracted, or physically distant even when attempting to maintain normal interaction. Communication cues involve changes in their response patterns, emotional expression, and willingness to engage in deeper conversations. Available avoidants may initiate more conversations, ask more questions, or volunteer personal information. Withdrawn avoidants often become more surface level in communication and less responsive to emotional topics. Energy cues relate to their overall enthusiasm and engagement in shared activities and conversations. Available avoidants seem more animated and interested in connection, while withdrawn avoidants may seem tired, distracted, or focused on individual pursuits even when physically present. The long-term benefits of mastered timing. When someone consistently demonstrates good timing with an avoidant, the relationship develops trust and safety that allows for increasing intimacy and connection over time. The avoidant begins to associate their partner with understanding and respect rather than pressure and overwhelm, creating positive relationship momentum that builds on itself. The avoidant becomes more willing to communicate their needs and emotional state when they trust that this information will be respected rather than used to pursue them during vulnerable moments. This increased communication makes future timing even easier and more effective, creating an upward spiral of improving connection and understanding. Good timing also allows the avoidant's natural capacity for love and commitment to emerge without the defensive barriers that poor timing creates. They become more generous with affection, more willing to make future plans, and more invested in relationship success when they feel understood and respected rather than pressured and pursued. The relationship develops resilience and longevity when both partners understand and work with each other's natural rhythms rather than fighting against them. Conflicts become easier to resolve, intimacy feels more natural and sustainable, and both people experience the relationship as enhancing their lives rather than complicating them. Mastering timing with an avoidant doesn't require perfection, But it does require awareness, patience, and willingness to prioritize the relationship's long-term health over immediate emotional needs. When done successfully, it creates a relationship dynamic that feels easy, natural, and deeply satisfying for both partners, proving that avoidants can be wonderful relationship partners when their psychological needs are understood and respected.